All right. I'm Joyce from creativeandproductive.com. So this is the October 2019 Q&A. Happy to be here. Just want to say first, I have a bit of a cold, so if I sound weird and if you see me chewing, it's because I've got a mint in my mouth so that my throat doesn't get too sore while I'm talking. All right, so I'll be answering all of your questions for the next 15-30 minutes. I'll be taking questions live, so if you've got anything to ask, and go for it in the chat. And I'll start with some questions I got this week. But just before I get into this, if you don't want to miss these Q&A sessions in the future, you might want to hit subscribe to get notified by YouTube next time I go live. All right, so let's get started with some of the questions I got this week. Again, if there's anything you want to ask me today, go for it. I'll be checking the live chat in a few minutes. All right, so this question I actually got today, or maybe I got it yesterday. Anyway, I answered it today. So what's a stinger? If you send your music to libraries or for sync opportunities, you may get libraries and publishers and agents that ask you for different versions of your song, and one of the versions they might ask you for a stinger. So a stinger is also known as a bumper, and it's basically a short music clip that's used as punctuation or a kind of kind of like a music logo. So two really famous examples would be, in that Law and Order show, the to-doom that's that's in between every time there's that text that it changes scenes. That's a stinger. Or in those advertisements for Dell, the toom tum. Sorry, again, I have a cold, but that's another example of a stinger. So my rendition of those stingers are probably not great, but if you go to a music library like Audio Blocks and you type in stinger in the search bar, you'll see a bunch of like 5-second, 10-second pieces that appear in the search results, and those are stingers. So don't pay attention to the results that have that are like 1 minute, because really a stinger or a bumper is like 5 seconds or 10, max 15 second clips. So you might want to listen to that and to get a better idea of what a stinger is. All right, so another question I got was, how would you structure a song for licensing? So there are exceptions. For example, if I'm writing a track for a trailer or a hip hop beat for a rapper, but most of the time I just write my songs the way I want to write them, and then I figure out how to place the song. So basically, before I start writing, sometimes I'll deliberately work in a genre that I think could be interesting for music libraries, but really that's more the exception. When I feel like learning a new technique or working with a different energy. But that's more the exception than the rule. So most of the time I'll just write in whatever way I want to write. Having said that, there are a few things that I do try to keep in mind during the editing process or towards the end of the writing process that I think is good to keep in mind when you're trying to get into music libraries and into the sync licensing world. So number one is having a strong intro. You want to keep in mind that the people who will be reviewing your music review a lot of music. So they'll go quick, and the intro, if the intro is long or if nothing happens during the intro, they'll just skip it. Maybe some of the reviewers will go to the middle of the track to see if anything happens there, but better not take the risk and just make the intro strong to start with. I also like to have a kind of a hook element that makes the track recognizable. So some people will say you should avoid that because it can get in the way of dialogue, which is true. It can be a good thing and a bad thing. Just make sure that you also have an alternative version without it, in case the people are interested in the track, but don't want that kind of hook that's more of a pop element than a instrumental licensing bed element. All right. I also try to have different dynamics throughout the track so that it's not boring. Again, licensing is one thing, but the song needs to be good. Whenever you ask, you read music supervisor interviews, or you ask people who work at music libraries, if you ask them what they look for in music, it's always quality. They're not, sure, there are genres that are trendy at one point and then less trendy, but what they're looking for is really high quality, great songs. So you want to make sure your song is dynamic, that it's fun, or that it's deep, or that it's drives somewhere, that there's energy. It depends on the type of song you're writing, but it basically needs to be great music. So keep it dynamic and interesting for the person listening. And the last thing, that's really specific to licensing is having a clean cut end, so no fade outs. It's similar to the strong intro. So in a more as an indie artist releasing your album, you might have kind of brooding, sentimental, or you know deep, meaningful, sorrowful songs that start really slow and end really nicely, and into the to the infinite and beyond. But in licensing, you want the strong intro and you want a clean cut end, like the sentence. All right, so having that said, that again, when I submit to music libraries, that was kind of like for the structure of a song. But when I submit to the library, I also make sure that I provide a full radio type edit of the song. So that means no explicit content. I'll usually have my track be between 2.5 and 3.5 minutes. But if it's shorter, if it's longer, that's fine. It's just rules are meant to be broken. I'm just kind of describing the best practices. I also make sure I have alternative mixes with different instrumentation. So I personally focus on writing instrumental music, but if you write songs with vocals, make sure you're also sending out the instrumental versions. And actually, if you're targeting music libraries, you'll notice that a lot of them, most of their catalog is instrumental. So you may want to submit your music, the instrumentals, right from the start, instead of submitting the song with the vocals and hoping that they like it and then providing the instrumental version as an alternative. I also like to submit shorter cues and stings. We talked about stingers earlier. So, shorter cues like, 90 seconds, 60 seconds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and then stingers, like really short, 5 second, 10 second, like snappy little musical logos. And also, I make sure I provide stem files. So we've talked about stem files in Q&As before. But yeah, and if you want to know a bit more about the audio files that I send over, I've got a post on creativeandproductive.com that's called How to Prepare Audio Files for Licensing. You might want to check that out, and you'll get like the list of tracks that I prepare and the alternative versions. Hey, Michael. Good to see you live. All right. Another question I got this week, and actually I get it fairly often, is how much should you charge for a license in a music library? So I actually don't have a very strong opinion on this. My only advice would be don't price yourself too low. Unless you have a clear strategy to attract a high volume of customers. So what I mean by that is that if you make your tracks available to license for $10, you're going to need a lot of people to buy that license to earn a living. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense unless you know that you'll be able to attract a high volume of customers. You can't just count on the library to bring that traffic, because you're not in control of that. Even big libraries like Audio Jungle or Pond5 that have huge traffic, they also have a huge catalog. So you can never be sure that your songs will get at the top of the search results. Even if you can do stuff with metadata to help, you don't really control that 100%. So, it makes sense to price yourself in a way that you can earn your money back, their investment back of time, energy, and the education you receive to be able to produce music. And again, this Also keep in mind that one of the really good things about licensing is that you can make more per track than you would with streaming. So if you're driving the prices down in the hope that it'll get more people to license your music, keep in mind that in the long term, you're devaluing yourself, your music, and the music of everyone else. So again, you do what you want to do, and everybody's got to do what they got to do to survive in this highly competitive world. But I don't think that pricing yourself down is the solution in the long term. So yeah. And another question I got was about um, when you're dealing with non-exclusive libraries, how do you handle the difference in prices depending on the library? And again, I don't have the perfect answer for you. I try to stay within the kind of recommended pricing of each library I'm with. But you know, there are different ways to do to do this. So you kind of need to figure out what's right for you, for your brand, what you feel comfortable with. But just keep in mind, I know that there's non-exclusive libraries sometimes have a bad reputation, but I remember someone telling me it's weird that music supervisors, get so annoyed by music libraries quoting different prices for the same tracks because like it's just the way the market works. When you buy a t-shirt, you may find the same t-shirt cheaper in a different store, and everybody accepts that. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Charge what you feel comfortable charging, what you think is a fair price, and keeping in mind you want to make a living, and little by little you'll be able to fine tune and see what works for you. All right. Um, if you've got a question, you might want to type it in now. Again, I apologize. I have a bit of a cold, so my energy is a little bit low. But before I go to the live questions, I'm just going to answer one last question that is related to published versus unpublished works. So I've mentioned last time in the September Q&A that I updated the post about how to copyright music on creativeandproductive.com. The reason for that is that in March, the U.S. Copyright Office changed the process of copyright registration a little bit. So I just thought I'd take the time to clarify the update. So basically, if you want to register your music with the U.S. Copyright Office, you have two options. One way of doing it is through a standard application form, and that you can use that process if the work you're registering is already published. And the second way you can register your work with your music with the U.S. Copyright Office is by using an application form called Group of Unpublished Works. In that case, you're limited to 10 songs. And by 10 songs, I mean 10 sound recordings and their underlying compositions. So it's kind of 20 copyrights because you've got 10 sound recording copyrights and 10 composition copyrights, but it's really just 10 songs. There are a few limitations to that option. It needs to be the exact same writers on all the songs and all of that. So make sure you check that out. Sorry, before you go through the process. But in the post I updated, there's the tutorial for both applications. And I recorded one tutorial for the standard application form, and you've got a tutorial for the Group of Unpublished Works application form recorded by the U.S. Copyright Office itself. So really, you have all the information you need there. Just quickly, the difference, the definition of published works is when an authorized copy has been made public with the intention to be sold and further distributed. So it needs to be an authorized copy. If someone just publishes, releases your work without your authorization, that's not published. And I think that, the intention to be sold or further distributed is really key in the notion of publishing. So for example, if your track is on SoundCloud, but you only have a private link that you send to your friends to get feedback, that's not really published. But if the track is public, is not private, it's public on SoundCloud, and you've released it through DistroKid, so it's on Spotify, or you released it on YouTube, then that can be considered published. So yeah, that's what published works are basically. So if your music is out there and it's in the public, it's there for the public to consume, and your intention is for it to be consumed as much as possible, then your work is published and you can use the standard application form. If it's still on your hard drive or you've only shared it with a few friends with private links, then it's unpublished, and you should use the group of unpublished works application form. All right, so that's pretty much it for the questions I got ahead of time. Michael asks, how many versions do you submit at a minimum? So I'm assuming you mean when you submit music to your music library, how many versions do you submit at the same time? And let me know if that's not what you mean in the chat, and I'll adjust my answer. But basically, when you submit music to a library, you only submit one version of your song. Initially, you're just sending one version of your song to the music library. And then if they accept it, if they like the track and they say, oh yeah, I want this, we want this in our catalog, please set it up. I don't know, they'll give you, it depends on the library. Sometimes they'll set it up themselves. Sometimes they'll ask you for additional versions. Sometimes they'll just give you access to a composer account, and you can add those alternative versions yourself. But basically, you only send one version of each song when you're initially applying to the music library. That's why I was saying that if you write if you write full songs with vocals, you may want to just submit the instrumental. Because if you submit the song with the vocals to a music library that's obviously only interested in instrumentals, they'll probably just say no. They're not going to ask you if you have an instrumental version. Some of them will, but most of them won't bother to ask you. They don't have the time or energy or desire to follow up with you, so they'll just say no. So when you submit your track to a music library that's obviously interested in instrumentals, then I would recommend you submit the instrumental version of your track. And then if they like the track and they want to add it to their catalog, you can add the version with vocals as an alternative version. Does that answer your question, Michael, or not really? Don't know if you're still here. All right. Well, if you don't have any other questions, I'll just call it a day and rest my voice so that I can sing this weekend. But yeah, I mean, I'm always available. If you have a question, don't hesitate to comment. Leave me a comment, and I answer as soon as I can. All right, Michael, awesome. And yeah, I'm here if you need me, and if you have any ideas for a blog post you'd like me to write, just let me know. Hit me in the comments section, and I'll do my best to help. All right, talk to you soon. Bye.